Cool. Hello, everybody. I'm here I'm Frank, and this is my project, Frank Stories, that I have going, that I don't know what I'm doing. I really have no clue what this is about, apart from talking about people's stories and trying to get them to talk about their stories. And I don't even really know what I mean by stories, but it's that fabric of our lives that is kind of based on a bit of fact and a bit of opinion, and it works itself into a narrative, and we believe it or we don't believe it or whatever it is. So I'm trying to connect people through this idea of everybody just having a chat with me for a while, and we just talk about ourselves, and we talk about what we think about or what we believe maybe, and we see where we go. And you know what, the thing about it is, it's not right or wrong, it's just about our stories and the fact we all have them, and some of them are brilliant and express us, and some of them limit us, and it's just exploring that without any kind of judgment about it, and just maybe having a laugh about it. So I've got Amanda Thomas, who is a friend of mine for a long time, and she's pretty cool, and she was one of the first names I had down on the list, because I know she always gives herself completely to these kinds of things. So how you doing, Mans? You all right?
I'm good, yeah. I'm good.
So you know what, as I said, I've got no agenda. It is literally just talking about both of us and yourselves and our relationship. And here's one of the things I've been thinking about, putting this together, and I've done a few interviews now, and it's made me think about my relationship with whoever it is I'm talking to, and that's ranged from, it could be family members to acquaintances who I think I know about, but I actually don't know as much as I thought I did. And then something comes up. And so it's, again, without necessarily any judgment about it, it's been really fascinating to just have a look at my specific connection with whoever it is. And obviously we've known each other for about 12 years, so we know each other reasonably well. We've spent Christmases together and that kind of thing, not on our own, obviously, with other people as well.
That cozy Christmas that we had.
Yeah, that secret Christmas back in 07. Yeah. But and it's been really interesting to think about that. And so what I know about Amanda, and I'm hoping maybe we'll flesh out some of this a little bit, is that she's a trained acupuncture therapist, and that's one of the things that has kind of defined what she's done, according to my story of Amanda. That's really interesting. So can we start there, Mans? I realised that one of the things that came up for me when I thought about talking to you was just how you first got into, and how you got, what led you to that, practice, if you like. What led you to acupuncture and that way of thinking?
Okay, I wasn't expecting to talk about this. Okay, what led me to it? Well, I mean, actually, when I left university, or actually in the middle of university, I sort of kind of fell into kind of doing care work, really. So
Wow. I
don't ever really feel like I chose it as such. It was just an easy thing for me to do, I suppose, and I just did that.
Wow.
And so when I actually left university, I did more of that, just because that's what I've been used to doing.
Okay. And
then I think further on down the line, I actually did a massage course for about a year.
Right. Yeah.
So initially I qualified as a massage therapist, and I think then in the meantime I started getting shiatsu treatments for myself.
Okay, right.
I started getting really curious about shiatsu, and I started thinking, well, maybe I could train as a shiatsu practitioner, just because I was receiving the treatments. And then I think around that point I went for my first acupuncture session.
Wow. Okay.
When I came, actually during the session, I was just fascinated with what is the guy doing, and I was actually asking him a lot of questions.
Right. Interesting.
But I wasn't getting any answers from him. So And it was around about that time that I was looking for, a career. I say a career change, but actually a career, because
How
really
old were you? How old were you at this time?
I was, gosh, about 29, 30 maybe.
Oh wow, okay,
Yeah.
that's later than I thought it was. Okay, that's really
Yep.
interesting.
So it was around about that time. Actually, it might have been a bit later than that because I think when I was 31, my mum died, and that was a kind of a big, you
Yeah.
know, it was a big upheaval, shall we say? And I think it was after that I did the massage. I must have been early 30s actually.
Okay, interesting. And
And
and from that you went and then trained.
well, I mean, when I left that acupuncture session, I was living in North London, and I remember walking along the streets, and it was just, I just felt for the first time so connected with nature.
Wow,
And
that's so cool.
I just felt so connected with the trees, and it was like, I just was fascinated with what happened during that session,
Yeah.
and it just got my curiosity up. And as I said, I was kind of considering shiatsu because I love the treatments, but then I
Yeah.
started thinking, well, I could train us to do shiatsu and go on to do acupuncture, and then it was a case of, well, why don't I just go straight to doing what I actually want to do, which was the acupuncture.
Wow.
And then I started, I looked into it, and then I went to a few open days, probably about 3 open days. But the one open day, which was the college that I ended up going to, actually the principal of the college did a talk, and she asked for volunteers for some acupuncture in front
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
group. And I volunteered. I was just like, I really want to get some more acupuncture, so I sort of pushed myself forward to get some treatment, and based on that was the deciding factor really of me going to that
Wow.
college, because the treatment was amazing. It was just amazing. So yeah, that was the beginning of the journey really. But I signed up then to study it. It was the London College of Traditional Acupuncture,
Right.
which is no more. But that was up in North London. I was living in East London, sort of thing, and used to travel up there. There was 3 years of training, so it was the beginning of a whole journey, really. Because you know, yeah, I mean, everything is a journey, isn't it? But that
Right.
doing a course like that was a massive journey, because there's such a big such a big focus on your personal development, because to be able to
Right.
become a practitioner,
Right.
that was a big aspect really. But and I guess that's where the whole personal development kind of thing started.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah.
um, and then obviously meeting Mick, and the
Right.
self-actualization, that kind of I mean, that was what, 10 years probably, of
You know
big.
what? It's really, what's really interesting is that in my head that you'd been doing this much earlier. So I thought that you started doing this in your teens, or in when you were still in Wales. And one of the things I was going to say to you was I was going to link it back to talk about your relationship with Wales, because you're born in Wales. I think you were born in Wales.
I was born in
Well,
Wales.
yeah.
In the
So I was
Caerphilly's
gonna.
Miners Hospital.
Is that right? Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So talk about that for a little bit, because I thought these two things went together, but again, my story is completely, the bits that we fill in, we get little bits of information, and somehow we put these bits together and make a story of our own about it. So my story about you is kind of like slightly skew-whiffed. So talk about, because I believe you went to university in Birmingham. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
So before that, what's life in Wales like for Amanda Thomas?
I mean, to be honest, my earlier, when I was, when I was born, and then two years after I was born, we went to live in Saudi Arabia.
Oh
So my
wow!
first, I mean, my earliest memories are actually of being in Saudi Arabia,
Wow!
not Wales. I don't remember the time before we went to Saudi in Wales, but I remember when we
Yeah,
got back.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
actually, for the very early years, I was 4 years in Saudi Arabia. So I mean, my
Wow!
days were filled with gosh, I just remember going to the pool every day.
That's amazing. I didn't really know that. I kind of knew, but I didn't really know
Yeah.
for that long.
I
Wow.
mean, we lived on a camp. It was like an enclosed camp. There were lots of expat people there. You know, our best friends were Scottish. It was a kind of, my mum and dad would wake up in the morning and they wouldn't know where we were. We would have gone round to somebody else's house, or, you know, vice versa. Someone would come round to ours. It was that kind of environment where you know, yeah, me and my brother playing outside naked, you know, playing with cockroaches, lizards.
I
It
never
was
knew that.
it was a very free time.
Yeah.
It was lots of freedom, really. We were just, and brilliant sunshine.
That's
You know,
amazing. And you were out there because your dad was an engineer.
yeah, my dad's an electrical engineer and he worked for an oil company. So, I
Right.
mean, I didn't really appreciate it at that time, but when I look back on it, actually, well, probably when we got, probably not until I was a lot older,
Yeah.
probably years, was able to appreciate how much of a big thing it was
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
them to have done that at that time. I mean, my mum was, she married when she was 17.
Wow.
She had me when she was 20, my brother when she was 21.
Is there?
And then, you know,
Wow.
2 years when I was 2, so 1972, we all up sticks and went to Saudi Arabia. But
Wow.
I mean,
That is amazing.
my mum was a real sort of driving force behind my dad. He had the qualifications, but she was very powerful. She put all of her power behind him, and
Wow.
you know, I didn't really appreciate it until later, you know, how much of a big thing it was that we actually went, you know, to actually leave the valleys.
Yeah.
Then when we got back, I grew up alongside cousins who had never left the valleys.
Of course. Of
You know,
course.
so you know, my world had already, my horizon had really broadened from such an early age.
Yeah.
So I just, when we got back, I think I actually came back with an American accent. Well, we both did.
It's funny. It's so cool.
Which was very funny for my mum's sister. You know, she was proud. It was like, oh, Addie Val, you know, we're going down the shop. You know, they thought that apparently that was a delight to them.
Yeah.
And when we got back, it was, you know, we joined the local school. We were treated like little celebrities, you know. We came back with these accents, and our hair was bleach blonde white, you know, we were tanned, and I guess. And it was a big thing, you know. It was like, tell us about your experiences, you know. But, yeah, so and then after that, I don't know, my mum was really keen for us to come back and be educated in this country.
Right, yeah.
Which I think was quite hard for my dad, because he would have carried on, you know.
Yeah.
But it was a case of a lot of the employees sent their children off to boarding school, really.
Yeah.
Mum was, you know, she was a very dedicated mum, you know. She was very,
yeah.
you know, there was just so much love from her, and there was just no way she'd want to do that. And I don't know what the conversations were between them, but, you know, it was because of my mum that we actually came back.
Yeah.
I think I remember my dad, that first year when we first got back, you know, I think he must have been quite depressed. I don't remember him coming downstairs really much, but
Did you have an idea? When did you start forming an idea? Obviously, education was going to be important. Your mum was pushing you to be, you know, to educate yourself, to go to uni. So, was it a thing for you that you? I suppose I'm thinking about identity, because I want to talk about identity at some point. So I'm kind of trying to work out if, you know, like, was Welshness and being Welsh a thing for you, where it was like, I'm going to go to England to be, was that a thing, or was it just, I'm going to go to Birmingham? Was that a deal, or was it not really?
I mean, it was very much a thing of, I definitely felt Welsh, I mean, even when we were away, coming back and, yeah, I mean, I felt Welsh. Yeah, I felt very Welsh. And actually, when I left home, when I was 19 by the time I left home, but my accent was so thick that when I first went to Birmingham, people couldn't understand me.
Really?
My accent was so strong that, become a bit of a joke with people, and then quite quickly, I learned to anglicize the accent,
Yeah.
Or you could oscillate between the two. Probably.
Right.
The reason why I chose Birmingham is because I wanted to go to a city, but actually at that point I was afraid to go to London because it seemed like a big thing to do.
Yeah.
I knew that, Birmingham was the second city. It was fairly close to Wales. That was my reason for wanting to go to Birmingham,
Okay. So, yeah. Interesting.
And
Eventually, though, you did that, because I'm one of the things I'm really fascinated about is, and it can be, whoever I talk about, and everybody's got a backstory. Obviously, it goes without saying, but I'm fascinated about how we get, here right now. Do you know what I mean? We're in Whitstable. And that journey we have from, so from the valleys of Wales to Saudi Arabia to Birmingham, and then at some point you did come down to London.
I did come down to London. I mean, I spent 5 years in Birmingham. And when I had a really good friend that I shared a flat with, and she'd come down to London. She was training as a doctor. And she'd moved down the year before, I think. So when I finished up there, there was nothing to keep me in Birmingham, but I knew I didn't go back to Wales. And it was like, okay, well, my friend was in London. I said, I'll give London a whirl.
Yeah,
so
that's interesting.
To London and got lots of care type jobs. Really, I worked with men with mental health.
Wow.
A lot of care jobs. And I ended up working for Hackney Council with people with learning difficulties, adults with learning difficulties.
Yeah.
And I did that kind of work really when I was in London. I was there for 10 years. So.
Wow.
And then that was when I did the acupuncture course towards the end of being there. And then I met Annette. She obviously, we were friends for quite a few years before we got together.
Yeah.
But when I finished up my acupuncture course, it was kind of a given that I would go and work at the clinic.
Right.
But also, she introduced me to the self-actualization work.
Sure. Yeah.
I didn't have, when I was doing my acupuncture course, there was no time for anything else really. I was so, it was very consuming. I was very sort of focused on that.
Yeah.
But as soon as I started the clinic, in Canary Wharf, and I did my first preview evening with Mick, my whole life changed over that first weekend. It was completely life changing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the whole that personal development, I suppose that is, even when I wasn't actively doing that, I was still doing that.
Yeah, right. It's fascinating to get, a story, like your backstory, and it's fascinating to kind of get that. And it's, just like what we've talked about so far is just like a little bit of your history, as we're talking about it right now. And it's fascinating. And what I love, if it's part of your story. It's selective, obviously, because we're focusing on certain bits, and obviously there's a whole, everything that you did in those whatever years, all of the rest of it's still there, but we don't talk about that bit. And that's what I find interesting about stories. When we focus down on a story, we select certain details to talk about, and there's all the other stuff we can't possibly fit in. So that's really fascinating. I find that lovely.
Plenty of filler, plenty of filler.
Plenty of filler, yeah. But sort of moving from that and kind of having a bit of a, you know, a look back at your life, if you like. I suppose where I want to go, you know, in maybe in the second half, if it is the second half, I lose track of time really easily in this. But it's like one of the questions I've been asking is, if I ask you a kind of question about identity, it's like, if I said something like, do you know who you are? In terms of what we've talked about and covered in the 20 minutes, does that question resonate? I mean, it's not a right or wrong, but it's like, how do you feel about your identity now?
I think it's interesting in terms of the identity, but the thing about identity is just they're sort of labels about ourselves, aren't they?
Right.
But we're so much more than that.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like if you went to a party and you met somebody, you'd be saying, I am Amanda, I am Frank.
Right.
Already,
Yeah.
there's something on, you're identifying with your name.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I've never ever liked my name. I've never ever thought it suited me. And then it's kind of like, well, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
But,
I love that.
you know, I am Amanda. I am an acupuncturist. I am a mum.
Yeah, right.
I am ...
What's
on the ...
Exactly. I think that's in a way it's similar to what I was just saying about story, isn't it? We select down and we go, you know, just for the purposes of conversation, because that's kind of how we do it. But we select down and we go, you know, I contain myself in this name of Amanda or Frank or whatever it is, and then you say, what I do is this thing, even though that's, you know, a fragment of what you actually do, but we mean it in a certain context. You know what I mean? I think it's really fascinating, isn't it? I love that we're so much more than any of the labels we pin ourselves down by. That's really interesting. It's, yeah. I mean, go on.
No, I've been. I told you about the experience that I had in Seattle.
Yes, go on.
Where I
really,
yes. You know, deeply connected with this homeless guy, Stanley.
Right.
And I mean, to be honest, the more I reflect on it, it was one of, if not the deepest connection I've ever made with another human being. You
wow,
know?
That's amazing.
But we're talking about identity. That wasn't me as Amanda. It wasn't me as acupuncture. It wasn't me as, there was no me.
Right.
I mean, this is maybe a bit deep, but
no, go for it.
There was no sense of me or I. All of those labels, everything was stripped away. You know, it wasn't about, it was just about me as a human being and him as a human being.
Right. I love that, because when you told me this story, and we can't go into the whole story, but it was so fascinating. I remember we sat at lunch and you told me you'd only just come back, and I was blown away by just your courage that in that day, you know, in just speaking to people and you know, and just following through and making connections. And that was the thing. It was all about it wasn't any labels. It wasn't any judgments. You were kind of out and you were just making connections with people, which was just beautiful. It was a fantastic story.
On I don't want to say my essence, but essence, everything that was stripped, you know, all those labels of oneself were stripped away. When it came down to it, it came down to kindness, generosity, appreciation of another human being, for them just being a human being, doing the best that they could. But I wasn't thinking of it like that.
Right.
Yeah. It was a deep connection. But the reason why I brought it up is because I've been reflecting on it quite a lot. But what I've noticed is when I first came back, I say when I first came back into my life, I was in my life then. when I came back to my life,
yeah.
initially I had the sense of having done a 360-degree turnabout in
Wow.
terms of what was important, what is important, you know.
Right.
And it gave me a very different perspective. But what I've noticed, I didn't realize this until last week, but how since I've come back, very innocently, I'm actually, without realizing it,
Yeah.
I was wanting to be or do more, and then unwittingly judging myself for not being
Right.
or doing more.
Right.
And actually, last week, I just felt really crap when I woke up on Saturday, and it was like, well, what's that about? And it's actually realizing how much I was judging myself for not doing or being more.
That's
But
really interesting.
how can we do or why are we never enough?
Enough, exactly. And
why are we never enough? Just in terms of being a human being, yourself, whatever that is, whoever you are, and just being yourself. Just yourself.
And
Why
it's
isn't that
kind of
enough?
it's almost like having the courage to do that, isn't it? You know what I mean? Having the courage just to stand there and just be yourself without having to say, oh, I drive this car, or I have this, or I identify like this. And it's kind of like, just, you know what, as you did, which is really interesting, because that story you told about being in Seattle, what came across for me was you were just out there. You were just, you weren't saying, look at my watch or anything. You were like, it was really interesting.
I was completely out of my mind. It was so refreshing. So refreshing.
Yeah.
I was out of my mind.
Yeah.
Totally
I love the way you mean that.
Way out there.
Yeah.
And it was so bloody refreshing.
Yeah.
So refreshing, like a brand new page. But I don't even want to say, but we can't help but get back into some sort of level of personal thinking where we start then judging ourselves, or it's being able to move. I sent a message to Dickin, because I started to realize how limited I was feeling again. But that's just and he sent me this lovely message back, and it's just like, well, these feelings arise to show us these, it's habituation, these habituated patterns. The feelings arise again to show us that it's an illusion. It's an illusion of our own minds. But it's knowing that, but being able to move beyond that.
Yeah. So on that line, I'm going to ask you another question. I'm going to throw this at you. One of the things I'm really fascinated about is how we thrive, how we flourish. What is it when we feel like that? What is it when we're just, maybe a really good example is you in Seattle, just making connections, which is one of the greatest things we can do, I think. How do we thrive? I know, and I'm asking that as a kind of, playful question. I'm not looking for an answer, but how do you think about that question? How do we thrive? How do we
It's
flourish?
funny you saying that about the how do we thrive, because towards the end of that experience, I had the same question, what does it take for us to really thrive?
Right.
Because when I look around, I see a lot of people struggling.
Yeah.
A lot of people struggling, and it's not necessarily about the amount of money they've got or haven't got, what they have or don't have, but there seems to be I don't know. I'm still pondering the question myself.
It's a good one.
It's a very big question, and I think don't know the answer to it.
No, that's right. But the beauty of it is, what I think is really lovely, and I've talked to a few people already, and what's really fascinating is that a lot of people are starting to engage with that question, without necessarily coming to any kind of conclusions. People are thinking about it. I think people like you, people like me, we're looking around and we're saying, wow, we know what it is to flourish. We've seen it, and sometimes we've experienced it ourselves. And then you look around and you go, wow, there's a hell of a lot of dysfunction going on. You know, the media's full of, you know, can be full of lots of negative stories. And then, and so I think people are having these kinds of conversations where we go, you know what, I like flow. I like flourishing. How do you do that more? Which is really interesting.
I mean, maybe the only thing that comes to mind really is, what? It's connection. When there's real connection, I think that can give you a sense of thriving.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And would you say that that real connection, as you just put it, which I totally get what you mean. Do you think that real, genuine connection, when you are, as you were in Seattle, let's say, comes when we drop a lot of that personal thinking, that ego thinking? Do you know what I mean? When we get out of that mind that's saying, you know, I'm not good enough and all that, and we, even if we pop out of that for a while, we're able to make those connections because we're kind of, you know, Sid Banks said something really cool, which is, he said, and I've it's gone completely out of my head now. It's something like humility. Humility isn't thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less, which I just absolutely love. And with that humility then comes, I think, the ability to kind of, or not ability sounds a bit formal, but you know, that kind of almost that really genuine connection where you're not judging anybody, and that's fascinating.
Well, it's taking yourself out of the picture, isn't it? Because I think that, you know, we can all be guilty of having too much, or just having too much thinking about ourselves. You know, how are we doing? How are we doing now? How are we doing now? You know, and to actually take yourself out of the picture, and you can call it being in service to somebody else, or it not being about you.
Absolutely.
There's something very, it takes the attention completely off you, and in that it allows for something very deep.
Yeah, it's almost like something else comes out, doesn't it? It's kind of like, you know, it's really interesting, I think. I'm gonna throw one at you. I'm not gonna give you any context, but you're gonna laugh.
I'm already laughing. Go on.
Amanda, what do you want? I love it. I love it. Come on.
More laughter. More of what I was talking about. There's that deep connections, I think, with other people. You know, there's you can't buy that in a shop. You know.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, more of that. I just. I mean, I'm sure I'm going to think about that connection with that guy for a long time, you know. But
yeah.
I just think we get walled off, you know. I get sometimes I feel isolated, or sometimes a bit of loneliness or whatever. But I'm not saying that for oh, poor me. But what I mean is, there's something lacking, you know, in terms of connection. I could have that experience on the streets with a homeless person. Okay, I don't even want to say it in that way, but
I know what you mean.
He had absolutely nothing. You know, he was rolling around with 2 shopping bags half full. That was it. You know. And just what he was standing up in, to have that depth of connection with another, doesn't matter who they are, but another human being in that sense. But what I realized when I'm coming back, we can get very separated off from other people. You know, I mean, I'm really grateful for my home. I love my home. It's really cozy, but there's I suppose I feel it now with the winter approaching, but there's it's a separation, which that isn't soothing.
You know what? What's really interesting is that I've got to a point in my life where I feel that. I've really felt that, and being very social and being someone that was brought up in a pub, so very kind of, talking and listening to people's stories, and then gradually probably over the last 15 or so years, for various reasons, isolating myself more and more and feeling like a real, just feeling like I'm kind of withering away because of that lack of connection. And then over the summer, almost having a kind of, a kind of long exposure epiphany of thinking, I would go to, like, I've been doing the film extra stuff. I would go to film sets and I'd have amazing, that was weird. Oh my God, yeah, that's completely thrown me now. But I think just to really, well, I've got it in my head. So really quickly, just to carry on, and then we can kind of say goodbye properly. Just one of the things I was thinking of was, over the autumn, was that I have to share myself more. I have to get out and do this is what I wanted to do. And whether it was going to be with, people I just met or people I've known for ages, I wanted to have something where we could make a connection, and then we could share that connection and say, you know what, we're all made of the same stuff. We have different stories about who we are, but that doesn't mean that we should separate ourselves. Do you know what I mean? Those stories might be difficult, and those stories might be, other people's stories might be a bit uncomfortable for some people, but we're all made of those stories. And actually that should bring us together, and we should be able to talk about those stories and talk about those things that connect us and the things that separate us as well, So that's partly exactly what you just said before we had that break, was very much where I'm at the moment. And it's just creating a space and saying, look, two people talking on a line can create some really cool energy,
It's just the fabric of our lives, the rich tapestry. That's what makes us. I mean, everything that's been before, we wouldn't be who we are if we hadn't have. So yeah, I can see where you're going now with it. Yeah. It's the fabric of our lives, isn't it? And everything that's happened before has made us who we are in this moment. Well, I lost you again. Breaking up a little bit there. Okay. Hello. Anybody there? Hi, Frank. Is it your Wi-Fi or?
Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Is it your Wi-Fi or?
Yeah, I think our Wi-Fi is screwed up. I'm not really sure why. So it's been really, really cool to speak to you. It's been brilliant, and it's been a real delight. And it's funny because we've known each other for a long time, but I've learned some things about you today that I didn't know. I didn't know you'd worked in the care sector, and that's just really fascinating. So thank you so much. As a final kind of question, I just try and think of this on the spur of the moment, and I suppose. Oh no, you're gone again. No, you're still there. Good. Just really quickly before it goes down again, I suppose. You still there? This is
I'm still here. Sorry, I just got a call coming in. Just dealing with that.
That's okay. Do you want to end it? Do you need to take that call?
No, that's fine. It's okay. Yeah.
So just the last thing, I suppose. I suppose I'd say. You know, this is totally off the top of my head. This is not scripted, and the one that's coming to me now is, what if you had a piece of advice to give your younger self? What would it be?
Probably not to be so afraid. Yeah. Probably when I was younger, I was. I don't know.
God, how many of us would say that to our younger selves? I reckon.
have more courage, and to, you know, I don't feel as I haven't embraced life. I really have, but
yeah, you have. You surely have.
Not to be afraid of any experience, really.
I love that. I love that. That's brilliant. And I think I can hear a lot of hears for people that are watching this as well. So that's pretty cool. Amanda, thank you so much. It's been brilliant to talk to you. I'll see you soon, babe. All right.
See you soon.
Thank you so much. Take it easy. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.